Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Alexis, aka Transcenderella, and today is another episode of Ask a Trans Woman. Today, we're going to be talking about dysphoria. Now, before we begin, I just want to take a quick second to mention, hey, you guys were going to be on a schedule and all of a sudden you weren't. I do apologize. I was dealing with some dysphoria issues initially, and then after Breonna Gay's murder, I just couldn't create content for a little bit. It didn't feel right. I didn't want to turn it into an about me thing, so no. But now enough time has passed, and I'm ready to get going. So, Lindsay, what's the first question?
Well, let's start with the obvious question. What is dysphoria?
So, what is dysphoria? I don't want to give the dictionary definition. That feels like a lazy cop out. But really, dysphoria at its core is the feeling of being in the wrong body. Is the easiest way to describe it. You know, your brain, using the trans femme context here, your brain says I'm a woman, your body says no. So it's just kind of, but in general, it's this kind of disconnected feeling between your brain and your body as far as what gender you are. That's specifically, or gender dysphoria specifically. I guess there could be theoretically different kinds of dysphoria. So in its largest sense, that's what it is. Everybody has their own kind of like way of describing how dysphoria feels, because it's different for everyone. We'll get into the kind of more of the minutia of it in a little bit, but one of the better descriptions I've heard is it's like wearing a Halloween costume that you're being forced to wear this Halloween costume, and it's constantly itchy. You know, it's like something's wrong, but no matter where you scratch, it doesn't go away because it's not actually itching you. It's just your brain thinking it's itching you. Because something is wrong, but you can't quite figure out what it is. The perfect example of this is I can look at myself in the mirror and I can be as pretty as I can possibly be. And I will still look at myself sometimes if I see the wrong thing. So like, let's say I see a little bit too much beard shadow, something like that. All of a sudden my brain immediately goes to, you're an ugly man. That's what I see in my head. And even though all the evidence is right there, I've posted a selfie on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and I'm getting likes and comments, and everybody loves it and says how pretty I am. But my brain is going, no, you look like an ugly man. That's dysphoria.
And with that being said, how do you personally deal with dysphoria?
So how do I personally deal with dysphoria? Because again, everyone handles things differently. I put this question out, I believe it was last week, maybe a week or two ago, on all the different social platforms, asking, how do you deal with dysphoria? And, the options and the ways people deal with it are varied. Everyone handles it differently. But the one kind of overall theme that I saw was self-care. Specifically self-care that really makes you feel feminine in a trans femme context. The way trans men deal with dysphoria, obviously going to be a little bit different. Maybe things that make them feel masculine, kind of. So how that works for you is going to be a little bit different. For me personally, I like to just, relax. I try not to think about my dysphoria. I do things, basically, I'll avoid mirrors because I don't need a constant reminder while I'm feeling bad about myself. But at the same time, sometimes I will intentionally post a bunch of selfies because I need people from the outside to remind me, hey, yeah, you actually do look pretty good today. So with that in mind, a lot of times I will put on makeup if I'm not wearing makeup, and that seems to be the cause of the dysphoria. However, I worry about that being an unhealthy behavior. So I wanted to acknowledge that here. And so that's why lately, if you've seen me posting on Twitter, on Instagram, when I talk about feeling dysphoric, but I'm not wearing makeup, I'm trying to intentionally separate the two because I don't want to need makeup to feel feminine, because I shouldn't have to. Not everybody wears makeup every day. Everybody, when they do wear makeup, goes full face to the nines, like they're going out to a special event every day. So just trying to become more comfortable in myself, and really just trying to focus a bit on what's causing the dysphoria and looking for ways that I can solve that problem. Because, like, for right now, my biggest dysphoria trigger, which we'll talk about dysphoria triggers in a little bit, but for me personally, one of my biggest issues is my facial hair. Now, obviously, you can't see very much of that right now, because I'm going hard at solving that problem, because I want to eliminate the amount of dysphoria I feel as much as humanly possible anyway. So finding ways to deal with it in that are less fleeting and more permanent when you can, those are the ideal ways to deal with dysphoria, because you'll feel less of it. But the one thing I do want to also caution you on, especially for those of you that are kind of new to this process of transitioning, which is a lot of people that watch these videos, when you're new to this process, dysphoria hits you all the time, so you kind of get almost a little bit numb to it. But as you eliminate dysphoria, it does come less frequently, but it hits harder when it does. And that's something you really want to be mindful of, is that if you haven't felt dysphoria in a while and like all of a sudden it hits you, it's going to hit harder. It's not just, a punch to the gut that's going to knock you out. It's one that's going to knock you out and then kick you while you're down several times. So be prepared for that as well, because those days can be really rough and they can be very triggering in other ways. And it's something you really want to make sure you take care of and be prepared for, because otherwise you may end up with more severe consequences.
All right. Is dysphoria only an issue that trans people deal with?
All right. So this question, I know who submitted this question. Is dysphoria something that only trans people deal with? And touched on it very briefly during the definition. Gender dysphoria, yes, because that's gender dysphoria is kind of a very unique to trans people kind of thing. But it is very closely related to body dysmorphia, which is a feeling of being unhappy with your body, like seeing it. It's almost like a sister condition, where you don't feel right with your body, but not in the sense that it's the wrong gender, but maybe you're unhappy with the way it looks, even though everyone else is telling you it looks good. And this can obviously lead to much more serious conditions like eating disorders. And it's just something you do also want to be mindful of. They feel very similar, and often can be comorbidities. So if you're feeling dysphoria, you may end up also developing a comorbidity of body dysmorphia, where suddenly you're very unhappy with your physical body, not because it doesn't look like the gender you want, but suddenly now your body doesn't fit the ideal image you had of yourself. Now, that is a spicy topic, and I'm not going to weigh into it, because there are larger people that feel body dysmorphia, and there are smaller people that feel body dysmorphia. And I'm not just talking about height. You know what I mean? So every body is valid. That's up to you about how you want to look within certain parameters. Like if you've got a serious medical condition, maybe take care of that. But, the idea of, technically right now I am obese from a medical definition. And I certainly don't think I'm obese, but I understand like the medical definition is kind of wonky. So that's what I'm talking about. Like, you have to be happy with your body and not just within the gender space. So do only trans people experience dysphoria in the way that we're kind of defining it? Yes, but that also doesn't mean, and I'm going to go ahead and just jump into the next question that I believe we have, which is, do you need dysphoria to be trans? And the answer is no, because not having dysphoria is the long-term goal of transition, is for what is up here to be reflected in your physical space. So if you don't have dysphoria, you're already a step ahead, because it's just, getting your body to where you want it as much as your genetics will allow. You don't need to constantly feel like crap to be trans. The idea that myth is out there, and it's in part a very gatekeeping technique. It's not necessary. It's not something that we need to keep hammering into people, that in order to transition you need to feel dysphoric. No, some people just know. You might just know, and there's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to go through years of suffering in order to transition or to be considered trans. That's not the price of admission. The price of admission is acknowledging, yes, I'm trans. That's it.
What can trigger dysphoria?
All right, so I hinted on this a little bit ago. What can trigger dysphoria? Again, your mileage may vary. Every person is different here. For me, as I said, it's my facial hair is my biggest dysphoria trigger. But at the same time, sometimes seeing myself naked is a dysphoria trigger. Whether that's noticing where my chest is at from a development standpoint. A lot of trans women especially, and trans men, feel what's called bottom dysphoria, which is an incongruence between the genitals they have and the ones they wish they had. Because what we're born with, to a certain extent, like, it can change from a medical perspective as far as surgery is concerned, but modern medicine can only do so much. So a lot of people, even though they may have bottom surgery, they can't experience the joy that is reproducing in like the human sense. So that can be just talking about this right now can be a dysphoria trigger for some people. So your reasons for dysphoria and the things that trigger it are as infinite as there are possibilities. The more common ones are things like facial hair or lack thereof, being misgendered when you're out in public, especially when it's intentional, like someone that knows you're trans and makes a point to either dead name you or intentionally misgender you. It's a shitty thing for people to do, and they usually do it knowing it's going to make you feel worse and that you'll walk around thinking about it all day. So that's something to be mindful of, is to not let stuff like that get to you. But overall, like, there are just so many different things. But the big ones are things like facial hair, and just kind of the general, like, the length of my hair is another one for me. I've been really struggling with growing out my hair, and I've done all the different ways that I know of outside of like direct surgical intervention. There's ways to like stimulate the growth, but it's expensive and it bothers me. But at the same, it's as a result, I'm working on being more comfortable with having shorter hair, because it's now at about a length where I largely get gendered properly just on quick glance, which is nice for me. But not everybody has that experience. So, don't take that as a end all be all for trans people. It's, every person is different. So you'll know your dysphoria triggers, because they're the things that make you feel the worst, especially when you can't quite understand why you feel bad. You just know you do. That's a dysphoria trigger.
Does dysphoria ever go away?
All right, so we hinted on this a little bit too. Does dysphoria ever go away? For the most part, yes. I'm at a point right now where I experience it very rarely. But like I said, when I do, it hits me harder than it ever has. I've talked to a lot of different trans people. Their experiences with dysphoria are all incredibly varied, but that's probably the one consistency, is that when it does hit, it's harder, especially if it's been a lot longer, because it's like, oh, I forgot what this feels like. And I think that's also why it hits a little bit harder. So does it ever 100% completely go away? Probably not. But it'll get to the point where it's so infrequent that you've learned how to manage it, that it it's less problematic. So, because I don't want to say 100% it's going to go away, because I'm different from you. So I can't guarantee it, but it's going to get better over time, especially as you learn to deal with it.
Can dysphoria disguise itself as other things like depression?
Excellent question. Can dysphoria disguise itself as other things? And 100% yes. One of my experiences with pre-transition and figuring out that I was trans is I dealt a lot with that idea of, well, do you need dysphoria to be trans? Because I didn't feel it, because I didn't know what it was, and I didn't realize that what I was feeling was dysphoria. So I went decades, literal more than a decade, feeling dysphoria and thinking it was depression. So, one of the common things you'll get thrown at you as you begin your journey of transitioning is you'll be told transitioning won't fix your problems, or transitioning won't make you happy. It's not going to solve your depression. They are lying to you, because they don't know that your depression is dysphoria. In almost every trans person I've ever spoken with, whether that's on the internet or in person, going through the process of acknowledging your dysphoria and acknowledging your transness solves the vast majority of your depression. It's literally, it's like flipping on a light switch. It's that quick, because it's like this relief of, oh, that's what I've been feeling. And the amount of the weight lifted off of you, that feeling of that epiphany, really, it means the world, because once you give a name to your problem, you can treat it. In the same way that when you are physically feeling ill and you just don't know why, and so you go to a doctor and the doctor's like, oh, you have this thing, this is how we treat it. That's exactly what dysphoria is. It's kind of this nebulous condition, but once it's diagnosed, you can deal with it, and usually by transitioning. And when you deal with it, you feel better. And so it might seem like something else, sometimes even physically. You will physically feel awful because you've become so depressed that it's affecting you physically, but you haven't quite figured out what it is, and you give it a name, and suddenly, I remember the first time that I really truly acknowledged I needed to transition. I think it was in a GameStop. I was out shopping, and I was having a conversation with Lindsay over the phone, and we had been talking about whether or not I was going to consider HRT. And the moment that she said she was comfortable with me transitioning and it wasn't going to affect our marriage, just this weight lifted off of me, and I could breathe in a way that I did not expect I was going to be able to. And just so much of the dysphoria, knowing that it was going to go away, it just melted away from me, and just knowing I was going to be okay. So there are God knows how many ways that it's going to manifest for you. But if you have this constant nagging feeling that you don't understand, you might need to start asking yourself some hard questions.
We're talking a lot about dysphoria. Why don't we flip the switch and talk about what brings you gender euphoria?
Okay. So the opposite side of the things, gender euphoria, is those moments when your gender just hits and you feel that joy. For me, it's I had it recently. We went out for a nice dinner on Valentine's Day, and the whole process of getting ready, I put on music. I was doing my makeup. It was before Lindsay got home, because I wanted to surprise her, because I had sent her selfies of what I looked like that day, and we didn't have plans initially. And so it was like, I'm going to make a reservation. I'm going to look cute. And it was that whole getting ready process. And then when it was all said and done and I had my dress zipped up and everything, I was like, it just felt right. I'm reminded of a scene in The Emperor's New Groove.
When the sun hits that ridge just right, these hills sing.
That's what gender euphoria is. It's that it just hits that spot, and you're just like, oh, this feels good. I feel good to be me. It's a magical experience, really. I don't experience it enough. All right, that's all we have this week. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. That really, really helps us. The channel's been growing a lot lately. Thank you for that. We really do appreciate your support. Next week's topic, super fun. We're going to talk about surgery. All your options. Everything that you might potentially do, might want to do, how I feel about it personally. Let's get into it. If you have questions, don't forget to drop them in the comments below. It's the only way we take questions now. Thank you again. We'll see you on the next one. And of course, have courage and be kind, especially yourself.
Did I brush you off?